In the early 1800s, to get away from the crowd and disease of Calcutta, a country residence was set up for the Governor General of India in Barrackpore. This was started by Wellesley, but much of what we see today was completed by Marquess of Hastings. On the road between Calcutta and Barrackpore, we come across many of these trigonometric towers. These were built in the early 1800s as the British embarked on an inch perfect survey of India. The road between Calcutta and Barrackpore formed the baseline of this survey. The British were many things simultaneously, some good, some bad, but the one thing that they did extremely well was geography. Many of the maps that they developed back then can still be used to this day. Remember the bit about the lions? The British were very possessive about that symbol, and they sued to get this lion removed from the gate to the Annapurna temple. Somehow, they lost the lawsuit, and the lion stays to this day. These are the southern gates to Old Barrackpore Park, somehow magically preserved. This is the route that elephants would be taken to the river. By the time of Bishop Heber's visit, the transformation of the Bengali countryside into an English white town was complete. This was off limit to most natives. Order and cleanliness were paramount. Barrackpore was a labor of love, mostly native labor and British love. Bishop Heber stayed here on multiple occasions as a guest of the Governor General. He preached in the Great Hall of this building on 27 December 1823 and on many other occasions. Just outside the government house in Barrackpore is an extraordinary marble fountain. This fountain was brought here from Agra Fort. In an extraordinary act of vandalism, Marquess of Hastings just took this. He also destroyed the hammam, trying to bring that to Barrackpore, but they did not have boats big enough to bring the hammam. After the British moved the capital to Delhi, the government house at Barrackpore slowly lost its importance, and after independence it became a hospital for a while, but it's slowly being restored, and inside is a wonderful little museum which talks about the history of this building. There is a mention of Lord Amherst, the Governor General that Bishop Heber met, and that they had a child, Geoffrey Amherst, who died in Barrackpore. There is also a mention of the mutiny of 1824, which we will come to in a second. In the list of VIPs that visited Barrackpore, Bishop Heber is number 4. There is also mention of a menagerie, a collection of animals and birds here in Barrackpore. Bishop Heber saw the menagerie and the animals. He also saw an elephant and rode an elephant for the first time in Barrackpore. These are sketches that the bishop made. But easily the most extraordinary treat at Barrackpore is the great banyan tree. The British and Bishop Heber were absolutely enamored by these great trees. This tree probably deserves a book to itself. It has witnessed more VIPs than any other tree in the world. Some of the visitors here included Sir Winston Churchill, King Albert of Belgium, Prince Wilhelm of Germany, Prince Gustav of Sweden, General Chiang Kai-shek of China, Jawaharlal Nehru. But one little forgotten side note of history: in 1878, General Ulysses Grant, the former President of the United States, paid a visit. His party frolicked and partied under this tree. A short distance away is a statue of Lord Canning, who watches faithfully over the grave of his wife, Lady Canning. Her body is buried here. The grave monument that you see is a copy. The original is now in St. John's Church. Lord Canning was a decent man at heart. The British press derisively named him Clemency Canning because of his tendency of being just to Indian mutineers. By the Hooghly River, there is a temple to Mahatma Gandhi. A small part of his ashes are stored here for posterity. The day that I visit the monument, it is being spruced up by these people who are hand painting black and white stripes on the sidewalk leading to the temple. The mutiny of 1857 is celebrated in India, but there were other mutinies before. There was a mutiny in 1824, shortly after Bishop Heber left for his journey, where Lord and Lady Amherst almost got killed, as they were in the government house in Barrackpore at the time. The man leading the mutiny was a person called Bindi Tiwari. Legend holds that Bindi Tiwari was hanged from this tree, and this temple is built in his honor. Who knows, maybe Mangal Pandey, the hero of 1857, was inspired by Bindi Tiwari? All European powers were involved in colonialism to one extent or the other. Serampore was the Danish colony in Bengal. This was the most beautiful European town in all of India, kept handsomely and beautifully clean. Bishop Heber visited with the governor, Colonel Crafting, and spent time with him in this government house. Thanks to its opulent palaces, kept beautifully clean, by the time of the bishop's visit here, this was known as the most beautiful European city in all of India. Bishop met Colonel Crafting, who was the governor here, and was very impressed by his administrative prowess. When Serampore was attacked by the Dacoits, Colonel Crafting, on his own initiative, rounded them up and killed most of them without even a summary trial. Bishop speaks of this very approvingly. This admiration for rough and quick justice, where people are denied even elementary human rights, is something that Bishop Heber shares with modern evangelicals. St. Olaf's Church in Serampore never actually had a Danish priest. This was partially funded by Richard Wellesley so he could see a spire from Barrackpore, a place that lacked a church till a lot later. This church has great similarity to St. John's Church in Calcutta, except, as the bishop must have noticed with envy, the columns are Ionian. A short distance away, I find the old Danish cemetery. There's the grave of Colonel Jacob Crafting, the man that Bishop Heber visited, who died a few years later. Jacob Crafting was Norwegian. Norway itself was part of the Danish kingdom at the time. Guided by a group of very friendly children, there is one important place in Serampore that I have to visit, that the bishop also visited. This is the pagoda of Henry Martyn, the legendary English missionary. Remember that East India Company prohibited missionary activity, so many missionaries settled here in Serampore. This used to be a temple that had been abandoned when the river got too close. Henry Martyn set up an organ here, and he rejoiced that the place where once devils were worshipped had now become Christ's oratory. Well, this place eventually lapsed into devil worship again. In the 1840s, this became a distillery, making the famous Pagoda brand of rum. It has been restored, but is still kind of difficult to access. After a very long day on the road, I get to stay at the Danish Tavern, quite likely the oldest restaurant in India. This has been lovingly restored. The rooms are delightful, and the whole place has an extraordinary charm with its naval themes. Way back in the mists of time, in the 1730s, when Kolkata was just a sleepy backwater, Chandernagore was a large, thriving metropolis of more than 100,000 Frenchmen. But the British were just biding their time, and their time came in 1757, when Lord Clive, on his way to encounter Siraj ud-Dowlah in Plassey, burned this metropolis to the ground. The city never recovered, and by the time the bishop visited, he saw a picture of desolation on the streets. This is the old governor's house, built by Dupleix in the 1750s. On June 16, 1824, Bishop Heber had dinner here with the governor, Monsieur Plassey, and his family. Aided by favorable winds, Bishop Heber sailed up the Ganga to Ranaghat. He saw many indigo mansions on the way, and the river was full of wildlife, including many river dolphins, which are now endangered. We make our way on a modern highway, which is crowded with trucks. Past Kalyani, Bishop Heber came sailing up a large flotilla right on the Chuni River behind me. Ranaghat was a small village at the time, founded by two salt traders. Rakhi Gulzar, a famous Bollywood actress of yesteryears, was born here in Ranaghat. She was born on August 15, 1947, a date that she shares with the Independence Day of India. By some quirk, this land was awarded to Pakistan. On August 18, 1947, the mistake was discovered and rectified, with jubilant crowds thronging the streets and hoisting the tricolor. Since then, this area celebrates Independence Day twice, on August 15th and on August 18th. I drive through the nondescript town of Krishnanagar with its requisite statue of Subhash Chandra Bose. We drive through the rural hinterland of West Bengal. The road lined on both sides with these pyramids of straw that has been recently harvested. Sibnibas today remains a temple town, a town of pilgrimage, as it was more than 200 years ago. These temples were already several decades old at that time. This is the Ram Sita Mandir that the bishop visited. The priest told him very proudly that this was made of brick or pakka. Nearby is the Shiv Mandir with its massive lingam. Bishop Heber arrived in Sibnibas on June 18th, 1824. He was sailing up the river. He had quite the flotilla with him. He was on a pinnace, a combination of an oarboat and a sailboat, and with him was his archdeacon Corey on a budgeroo, a smaller boat, and there were two smaller boats behind for luggage and cooking. These boats must have been pretty fast because they made it all the way here in 4 days of sailing. Company era paintings give us a good idea of what these boats must have looked like. Daniel's painting shows us a pinnace. Notice the East India Company flag flying on the side. This one shows a pinnace near the fort of Ramnagar in Varanasi. This painting by Solvins shows us what a budgeroo looked like. All the fancy boats of the Ganga are long gone. I am on a makeshift ferry crossing the river. While in Sibnibas, Bishop Heber ran into Raja Omichand, the great grandson of Raja Krishna Chandra Roy, a one time powerful king of these parts. Raja Omichand had fallen on hard times, but still had a palace that had some resemblance of royalty. Later that night, the sons of Raja Omichand came to pay a respectful visit to Bishop Heber. They were dressed in their finery. The conversation was in Persian, which was the state language of these parts, even in the 1820s, and they said farewell with the Mughal rituals of Rukhsat and Nazar. Thank you. This entire area is steeped in a rich religious tradition of bhakti or devotion, with multiple old temples scattered around. A few kilometers from here is the temple of the Vedic Planetarium, one of the world's largest temples, with its distinctive pastel blue dome said to be inspired by the US Capitol. This panoramic photograph is from the website of the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium. I decide to skip this monstrosity. From Sibnibas, Bishop Heber took a long detour into what is now Bangladesh to visit the British at Dhaka. For obvious reasons, I avoid that detour. I take a detour of my own to visit the battle site of Plassey. We drive through an avenue shaded by old growth trees, probably planted by Lord Curzon himself or under his orders. Lord Curzon revamped the monument that now exists at the Battle of Plassey site. The Battle of Plassey was formative in the foundation of the British Empire in India. Led by Robert Clive, the British were heavily outnumbered. They only had about 1,000 European soldiers and 2,100 Indian sepoys. Siraj-ud-Dowlah, the impetuous young Nawab of Bengal, had more than 50,000 troops with him. But the British had two major advantages: discipline and tarpaulin. With Clive's unshakable will and his soldiers' discipline, a thin line was maintained. The British chalked this discipline to Clive's heroism and valor, but really, this man, who was profoundly corrupt, had bribed pretty much the entire Bengal army. He knew the conclusion was foregone.
The tarpaulin kept the powder dry for the British, even as the Indian powder was all soaked with a sudden rain shower. The British won handily. They only lost about 10 European lives, a trivial price to pay for the dominions of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa.
The treasonous Mir Jafar, clearly subservient to Lord Clive, was sat on the throne of Bengal. Siraj-ud-Dowlah was promptly killed by Mir Jafar's son. A dual government was then formed, where the British collected the revenue, but the Nawab was in theory responsible for everything else. This resulted in the rapacious East India Company, egged on by constant demands from its board of directors in London, looting the countryside, and predictably resulted in an extraordinary famine where more than one third of the population of Bengal perished. Even in his lifetime, Clive was a controversial figure. He was lauded by many for his military exploits, but detested for his greed and corruption. To rehabilitate his image, the East India Company commissioned this painting, which is pure evil in its concept. This shows Robert Clive explaining to the Nawab the plight of the British invalids and securing money for their care. This painting was exhibited in 1772, when the Bengal famine was at its peak and one third of the population of this province had perished. Clive's reputation was not redeemed by artwork, and he eventually died by suicide. But many decades later, his reputation was resurrected by Macaulay's essay on him, which painted him in heroic light and which was required reading for all British schoolchildren from 1840 onwards.
It is widely believed that Indians did not fight that day, but that is not true. They did fight, and more than 500 were killed in this battle. A walk through the fields brings me to these three obelisks, raised by the locals in the memory of Mir Madan and two of his colleagues. It was the brave charge of Mir Madan and his death at 1 o'clock in the afternoon that turned the tide in favor of the British. I rejoined the bishop near Farakka, close to the ancient capital of Bengal at Gaur. That city was abandoned after the Ganga changed course and the city of Gaur was left high and dry. The British were always conscious that something similar could happen to Kolkata, that Ganga would change course. India constructed the massive Farakka barrage on the Ganga, and water from the Holy Ganges is diverted to the Hooghly through this canal so the port of Kolkata does not get silted up.
This is industrial country, and we drive past large factories and eventually make it to Rajmahal. Bishop Heber describes this place as the palace of Shah Shuja, the brother of Aurangzeb, although we know that this was most likely constructed earlier by Raja Man Singh, Akbar's favorite general. Bishop Heber describes three very beautiful arches of black slate leading to a small but singularly elegant hall opening immediately on the river, though a considerable height above it. For their size, says Bishop Heber, I cannot conceive more delightful apartments.
This palace was at least initially partly built by Man Singh, but by the time of Shah Shuja, this was a massive complex well described by a Dutch traveler in 1639.
This palace was the site of a massive fire in 1640 when many of Shah Shuja's family died. Given his illustrious and notorious siblings Tarashiko and Aurangzeb, Shah Shuja is now completely forgotten, but as a child he was the favorite grandson of Emperor Jahangir. One time when he fell sick, Jahangir vowed to give up hunting if he recovered. As a young adult, Shah Shuja was appointed governor of the rich province of Bengal.
Shah Shuja, the star-crossed son of Shah Jahan, could never get anything quite right in his lifetime. He lost the war of succession to Aurangzeb and was brutally killed in Arakan, where his story remains a part of the founding of the Rohingya Muslim story. Not far from here was one of the most tragic of Mughal love stories. Muhammad Sultan, the oldest son of Aurangzeb, was in pursuit of Shah Shuja. In happier days, he had been engaged to marry the accomplished Gulrukh Banu, the daughter of Shah Shuja.
Swayed by his heart, Muhammad Sultan crossed over to Shah Shuja's camp. This betrayal was an enormous blow for Aurangzeb, who found a typical treacherous way to get his son back. He let her fall into the hands of Shah Shuja, which made it seem like the entire thing was a plot by Aurangzeb to get his man into Shah Shuja's camp. The not so smart Shah Shuja fell for the ruse and expelled Muhammad Sultan. Aurangzeb then imprisoned him until his death. Aurangzeb had his oldest son and his father both in prison at the same time for several years.
One little side note, the Ganga flows right underneath the walls of this palace at Rajmahal. It flows wide and looks like it's been here forever. The British built a cargo line from Tinpahar to Rajmahal and used this place for cargo transfer in the 1850s. But by 1863, the Ganga had moved away, many miles away. Even though the Ganga came back here in the 1880s, the British had permanently moved cargo facilities to Sahibganj, where they remain to this day.